everyone. So we did this Sunday, and we had a really good conversation on Sunday. And as you all know, in our lives, our individual lives, things have a different feel, right? Like when you're having a discussion about something in the middle of your workday, even if you're not at work, versus how you're talking when it's Sunday Sunday, late afternoon, Sunday, going into the evening. And I think social media really, really exemplifies that. Like, so I'm going to ask the question I asked on Sunday, which is, okay, and I'll start with the answer so that nobody thinks that this is a gotcha or a trick question. What social media have you been on today? So because it's a Wednesday, my answer is actually longer than it was when I answered my own question Sunday. On Sunday, today I've been on Facebook, I've been on Twitter, and I've been on Instagram. And that pretty much is my list of social media. Like there's other kinds of social media, but that's where I was today. Okay, who else has been on social media? Who wants to share their social media footprint today?
I've been on Instagram today.
Okay. Did you post or just look?
I just look. I do not post.
Okay.
She didn't do that while she was at work, though, Michelle.
No, absolutely not at work.
Hey, if you did, as long as your boss ain't sitting right next to you in the cube.
He is, and I was not here.
He's here.
I can verify that.
Anybody else? What were you on?
Facebook and LinkedIn.
Okay. All right, anybody else? I'm on LinkedIn too, so I lied. LinkedIn is on my list of things on social media. That LinkedIn was my first social media experience. So, okay, anybody else?
Facebook.
Okay. So, were you merely consumers, or did you post anything on any of your social media today?
Just consumer.
Okay. And so, and those of you who aren't saying anything, raise your hand still. And if you don't want to get on the camera, I will understand if you've been on social media, if not today, this week. Okay. All right. Thank you. Exactly. So as we all know, social media, in my opinion, has become, for some people, maybe not all, but for some people, like the other member of their household. And I don't know about you, but before I get out of bed in the morning, I am literally hitting snooze like 5 times on my alarm that I have checked out Twitter. Twitter's the main thing because I have found that Twitter is what tells me about the big things going on in the world. It used to be Facebook. It used to be that I'd wake up to Facebook because I wanted to know what the people that I personally know were up to. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, social media habits. Mariah, if we could go to that slide just for a second. You know what, Mariah, skip it. With this group of people, you know what, you can skip the screen sharing. Thank you. Because with this group, we can talk about it. You don't really need to see it written down. So what do you all look at social media for? The 4 topics that I think that people look at social media for: they look at articles, they look at jokes, they look at videos or visuals, or they look at opinions. Now, anybody want to volunteer some aspect of social media that they really are there for? For me, it's articles. I mean, I'm in the news business, but I like to stay up to date on the latest things. What about the rest of you? Jokes? Anything? Anybody? Is that your go-to for jokes or videos or something?
I'm on Snapchat quite often. I don't know if anybody said that before I hopped in, but I'm on Snapchat and get educated on a lot of what's going on in the world on Snapchat. So I just kind of get on there for that to update my people and my fans as well.
Okay, so explain. Okay, so you help me out. Help me. I still don't get what Snapchat is. What is Snapchat?
So Snapchat is basically where you take pictures of it's kind of like how Instagram is. You can take pictures, and except you don't have to put like a caption at the bottom of it. You know, like if you post something on Facebook, like you can't just post a picture. You can, but you like probably put details to it. With
Sure.
the Snap, you can just take a selfie, and then that'll be my story. Or I and I can record it and then put filters and just be like, this is what's happening. So I like Snapchat. That's my go-to. Wake up in the morning, follow me.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's good to know. So is there any other media? Like who are you all are TikTok people? All right. Okay. Thank you. I was gonna say, can somebody explain what the appeal of TikTok is?
Well, I don't know. I don't use it for the cute little dances that you see the little youngins doing, but I get a lot of recipes and like quick hacks for how to do things in your house. And they're just like 30-second,
Okay.
almost like quick end videos of
Okay.
just interesting things. It's just,
Okay.
it's how I waste time.
Hey, and look, please know there is this whole talk is not about shaming or saying social media is bad, because I'm a proponent of social media. I just think that it has limits and things we should be more conscious about when we're using it, especially for those of you who are raising kids, teaching kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here's my next question. How do you consume social media? Like, do you do it on your phone, on your computer? Do you wait till you're by yourself? Are you sitting there with your family there? I mean, I live alone, so pretty much 90% of my consuming of social media, nobody's around, unless you count red lights at cars. You know what? I would say Pinterest is that's a question in the chat. I would say Pinterest is a social media platform, is just the one that will probably get you in the least amount of trouble. Because I think Pinterest ends up being a place that is almost solely resource driven. As opposed to the other social media, which tends to be more interactive and more passing on of news and opinions in a way that makes it less than resource driven, for lack of a better way. How many of you use social media when your children are around? And if you don't want to say out loud, just silently nod to yourself. Just be like, so, because that's part of what this conversation is about, is how does social media impact your children in terms of how it impacts you? So, this could be a conversation about access to the internet from a class and sociology standpoint. That's not this talk. This could be a talk about how your kids use social media. And while that can be worked into this conversation, that's not even what this is about. It's about how you think about and use social media, and how in direct and indirect ways it involves. So what do you think, in my opinion, and don't volunteer if you've already been to this before with me and you know the answer. What do you think are the three biggest topics of external to your personal life information that people went to social media for in the past year?
Celebrities.
Okay, celebrities. What's a big event? Okay, voting, which related to what? The presidential election. Okay, a lot, and I don't know if you guys have seen the stories the last day or two about how CNN and probably all of the big news stations, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox, how their ratings have plummeted since November, December, January. And people want to make partisan arguments. And it's like, no, I think all of us were sick of watching. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but it was nonstop, looking at social media and the actual cable to see what the latest was. So politics, the presidential election is one. What's another big one? I'll give you a hint.
I think you need to go get a test.
Right, COVID, right? Come on now, COVID. Like, don't tell me that if you're on this, I'm sure you read several articles that probably showed up on your feed about COVID. And somebody's mentioned the third one, social justice. Okay. You probably were looking at information about the protests, photos of the protest, opinion pieces about the protest, videos of the protest. I mean, whether you participated or not, those social justice, those George Floyd, those Breonna Taylor protests, they showed squarely up in your living room, right? Did anybody not see anything on social media about social justice in the past year? In fact, don't volunteer that. Because, again, if you're having part of this conversation, then race and equity means something to you, and it didn't just start meaning something to you today or this week. But think about all the information through social media you took in. And by information, I don't necessarily mean factual information. I mean, did you all see memes? Right, the attack on the Capitol. Like, did you all, which I relate to politics, exactly. But I mean, meme after meme after meme about politics, about social media, even about the pandemic. I mean, so much of our information that we have is coming through social media. So here is the slide that I do think I want us to all look at of the personal events, the personal reasons why people go to social media. And while Mariah's finding that slide, I'll start off with the first one. So how many of you use social media to stay in touch with friends and family? Any of you? Somebody out loud. Is it, if somebody could say, okay, all right. I mean,
I went to a boarding school and we were from all over the world. And I remember when I created my Facebook, the excitement of in 5 seconds reconnecting with my friends from Bogota, Colombia, and Botswana, Africa, and just that way of connecting. So absolutely, I use it to connect and stay connected with people. Primary way I only use Facebook, by the way.
Well, and then even though I say friends and family, indirectly, part of that may be for some of us communities that are like friends and family. Like for me, I'm a playwright. In addition to my life as a talk show producer and diversity diva, I'm a playwright. So I mean, I have theater friends all over the country. And that is a way that we stay connected. Now, here, the next thing on my list is the not so great way that some of us use social media from a personal standpoint. A lot of people use it to market their lives. They may not even realize that they're using it to market their lives. And I can imagine, because I am not a parent, but most, not all, but most of my friends are. And I'm of the age where my friends who have kids, it ranges from the kids they're still raising to having grown children out in the world, if not grandchildren. And y'all know that some of y'all love to brag on your kids in a way that is very curated. And here's what I mean about that. It's the distinction between my daughter just got home from college today. I'm so excited for her. She made the Olympic trials. Like, heck yeah, you should be going, like, saying something like that. But that's different than the constant pictures that you may put up of, look at my child, doing 80 different kinds of gymnastic stuff, because I know she's going to be a future Olympic athlete. Well, there's nothing wrong with that if you only put up those photos and never put up the "I am so tired right now," or I love that my kid is in gymnastics, but I tell you, I spend hours on the road, or going to their events ends up being my vacation. I could use a vacation on the beach. You know what I'm saying? That distinction between curating a reality versus just sharing with people your reality. So then there is the one that I like. That's why I have that picture of the cat looking out the window. That's right next. It's in the slide, because when I came across that, I was like, especially when I lived on the main street, the main drag of Louisville, my coworkers were laughing at me because I was always going, "Hey guys, let me tell you what's going outside on Broadway." Some of us are nosy. As I was saying on Sunday, I have tracked entire relationships on Facebook. Like, somebody will be like, "Oh, I just broke up with somebody," and I'm like, "Ooh, they did. Hmm. Let me go back and go through and see if I can predict where things fell apart for them." I mean, I love to do that. Okay, call me a nut, but I'm like, and don't we all miss the days when people just posted pictures of the meals? Like when our biggest complaint was, "Oh my God, if I see another picture of pasta from this person, I'm going to scream." Like the good old days of social media, when you were complaining about how vapid people were. Now it's the opposite. It's like, I now know every opinion of every person on social media. Then there's bored. How many of us are on social media? So is any of this resonating with anybody? Going on social media because you just, like with me, when I say that I get on it in the morning, a lot of it is I just don't want to start my day yet. So I get on to track what's going on in the world. And then, and I think we really need to talk about this last reason, being on social media as a form of distraction. And then asking yourself, and can we go back to just all of us again on the line, Mariah? How many of you find that you get on social media because you don't want to hear your kid ask about something for the 15th time, or you're trying to drown out something that's going on in the household? Let's talk about the distracted use of social media. Anybody?
I think I use social as transition material of in line or in waiting for something.
Yes.
It's just right there to pass the time.
I agree with you. I wonder if that's why a lot of us, speaking for myself, I resemble this remark, don't read as much as we used to, because we use social media as our way of passing time, just like you said, in lines, short lines, long lines, when we're traveling even. You know, the good old days when you would bring a hard copy of a book, sometimes are replaced with, well, I'll have my phone, you know. And while I do have a Kindle app on my phone, half the time I'm not looking at the Kindle app. I'm looking at what craziness is going on social media. Anybody else?
So if I could maybe like engage the parents just a little bit, one of the things that came out on Sunday related to this whole, is it because you use it for a distraction or it becomes a distraction? And what does that mean with when it comes to your children? And like kind of the example of you get sucked into Facebook and you look up and the living room's torn up and you're angry because your 3-year-old tore the living room up. Is that the 3-year-old's fault or yours and social media's? You know what I mean? I don't know if any
Yeah.
parents on the line have felt the distracted parenting thing happen because of social media. I have a 15-year-old, and on Sunday, I confessed that I called myself having a date with my 15-year-old and watching a movie last week, and realized that we both ended up getting on our phones, her worse than me. And so last night I was like, let's watch a movie with no phones. And we put them back. Now, as soon as the movie was over, she was back there getting her phone. But my point is that you call yourself having an activity with your kids and you look up and the phone has taken over your life.
Exactly. I mean, it's true. And then Kelsey, great point. This is in the chat. I make it a point to not let social media distract me from my kids, but I do use it as a tool to avoid social awkwardness out in public, which I think happens all the time. You know, tonight, because this is our first week back in the office. I work for a local radio station, and some of our people are so new that they are working remotely from Louisville, but several of them flew in this week as part of our opening week. Well, tonight we're doing karaoke this evening. Now, y'all know, let's keep it real. There are going to be several people who are sitting there, because you know how these work social events are not mandatory, but highly encouraged, i.e., you better have a sick relative if you don't show up. So you know that to that social awkwardness standpoint, there will probably be quite a few people, you know, who were on their phones. And I am not a karaoke person. I'm sure some of you people probably know that. If you don't know that, that doesn't mean that I haven't been known to try to sing at a karaoke event, but you know. But then ask yourself this question: how many of you are on your phone to avoid awkward situations when you're out in public with your kids? Right? I mean, I've seen it as a non-parent. I have been out at stores where I have done the judgmental thing. I'm being transparent, where I'm like, this woman's head or this man's head is completely in their phone while their kid is an uncomfortable distance away. I mean, I'm feeling uncomfortable at how far away their kid is while their head is deep in a phone. Has anybody ever seen that? And I'm not going to ask you if you've done it, but yeah. But Rhonda, you were going to say something? Uh-oh. Yes.
No, I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And back to the being in lines, like Mariah was saying, folks are in transition. And as part of the being in transition, they're like, it's not going to take but a minute for me to check my Facebook feed. I don't know about you, but my minutes have turned into damn near an hour sometimes. Like if I don't want to get sucked in, I have to put the phone away. So one of the things I want us to just think about is ways that social media, I mean, I'll get to the positive, but before we get to the positive, some of the ways that social media can be disempowering. So one of the ways is it makes the world feel worse. Can anybody relate to that? Right? I see some heads nodding, right? Like you look at social media and it takes you down a bunny hole of thinking everything is bad. Another way that it can be disempowering is it can make you feel anxious or depressed. Studies have shown that. Maybe it's just me, but sometimes on a bad day, I don't really want to see all the fabulous things that are going. Like full disclosure, as a single with no kids, most days I am completely fine with that. But on a bad day, I get on Facebook and I'm like, man, what must it be like to be on a beach with your husband? Or man, that looks like fun having your kids at Disney World. I mean, do you guys ever think that? Anybody want
I
to?
think that's the terminology, the humble brag. This is where I learned about it, where somebody's saying, God has blessed me with a husband that would buy me a Louis Vuitton bag or something. I think that is rampant too. It's like that sort of insidious, not outright in your face. I've got this, you don't, but kind of that thing.
Exactly. And then Ashley, you were saying so much negativity or disaster news, and then you get in your rabbit hole of negativity. Oh my God, I am really bad with that, especially as a news person, because you read the one story, which then takes you to another story, which then takes you to another story. And then by the time you're gone through 8 stories, you're like, damn, the building I'm sitting in may just crumble. Like your mind goes like to all these places. I don't know about you, but especially at the height of COVID, and it was a good thing to read about ways to stay safe from COVID. But I don't know about you, there were some days where I was like petrified at the thought of getting COVID and what it would mean for life. And so that balancing act between getting informed, staying plugged in, but not becoming overwhelmed. Anybody feel me on that?
I don't know if you saw Charles's comment a little while back in the feed where he said he finds himself using social media more because he's working at home full time now. I don't know if you're in a position to be able to talk out loud and want to build on that, Charles, but I think
Charles,
maybe
did you take your mute off?
You're on mute, and it maybe is not Charles unless you are just a female Charles.
No, it's Aaron.
Aaron.
It's from our. And yes, I have, now that I work home, I work for a medical supply company. Now that I'm home full time, I've noticed that I've been on social media a lot more. I'm like, checking it between here, checking it between there, like, oh, well, when can I squeeze in to check this or to check that?
I mean, it's true. It really is true that, like I said, just being back at work more than not this week after 15 weeks of working from home, I'm like, oh, I can't just freely jump on Facebook like I used to. And the irony of it is that I actually use Facebook some for my work because I am the producer of a weekly talk show. So I'm constantly having to track down people to be guests on the show. And that might mean that the only way I can find them is through a Facebook page. So I have to write them a private message. But whenever I'm on Facebook, I am totally self-conscious. It feels like it's personal, even when it's for work. Somebody else had a comment right after that. Okay, Bailey, talk about that. What are ways you filter out the negativity? How do you do that? If you can talk, if you can't talk, because you're,
so there's like there is like an option on your like face filter out a lot of like untrue COVID facts or anything that has to do with violence. I try to filter out so I don't have.
okay.
Because certain things kind of will bring me down, and since I'm working, I try not to be on social media, so it kind of helps me a lot.
Okay. All right. That's a good tool. So have any of you ever seen bullying behavior on social media? So give me an example of what is bullying on social media.
You see it a lot. We talked a little bit about this on Sunday session, but you see a lot with parenting where you might be celebrating something of, oh, my child is eating for the first time, or whatever the case might be, or baby's in the pool for the first time, whatever that situation is. And almost every time there will be comments, you're feeding your baby that? Really? Or does that baby have sunscreen? And it almost feels like a kind of a bullying sort of attack on you as a parent and caregiver for your child. I just saw something yesterday, so that's fresh in my mind.
Exactly. I think what happens with social media is that this is the worst part of social media, right? That everybody feels the need to comment on everything. Like some things don't require investigation or interrogation. Sometimes you just want to put up the picture to express a mood. I'll give you an example. Like I was really kind of irritated, borderline hurt when I first moved into my apartment, now that I've been in a couple of months, and I had made the point of putting the picture up was to say, with me moving in the middle of the pandemic and having most of my worldly goods in storage in Kansas City, all of my things, including my grandmother's furniture, are all under the same roof for the first time in over a year. And what people got fixated on, which is kind of what you're talking about, Mariah, is your dining room table isn't centered exactly under your living room, your dining room chandelier. And person after person.
Friends.
Huh?
Who are your friends, Michelle? Said that.
Person after person. Yeah, since you mention it, that's just, yeah, you need to move that table over a few inches. And finally, after like a dozen people had something to say, I'm like, thanks, guys. And this was because I know how to shame with the best of them when I need to. I said, thanks, guys, for helping me to celebrate my dead grandmother's furniture arriving in Louisville. Rim shot. Boom. And so then it's a handful of people. Oh, it's beautiful, Michelle. Like, oh yeah, she must be really. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't that people meant any harm, but it's still, and so yeah, that situation was completely unimportant. But to me, it was like, this is an example of just click like and keep moving. So I can only imagine if as parents, you're getting any kind of feedback about anything you do with your kid. I can't even imagine how upsetting that must be. Have any of you experienced that?
I wasn't going to say that, but when you asked the question about bullying, I thought of when the domestic violence situation happened with Chris Brown and oh my gosh, I think I intentionally blocked her name out because I felt like she was villainized so much in that situation. I'm like, nobody really knows what happened, and he still shouldn't have put his hands on her. But it was you know, and maybe that whole concept that you brought up on Sunday about just don't read the comments. Just don't read the comments.
Yes.
Like, I mean, who's really not, I mean, is that possible for people when you post something to not read the comments?
I know. Emily, I was thinking Rihanna also. So thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, it does end up being like, for example, I'm at the point now where I can already know what post. Like literally right before we sat down, I'm sure a lot of you, if you get news alerts, you got some news alert about Bill Cosby and the judge overturning the sentence or something. And I guarantee you, as we speak, there are thousands of people across America on social media in a fight about Bill Cosby. I literally won one day on social media. Keep in mind, I have over 2,000 Facebook friends. I had to unfriend 3 people in one day. I hadn't unfriended 3 people in the past 3 years because it was men who were all defending Bill Cosby in a really inappropriate way. 3 men who I don't know well, because none of the men who I know well would have said any of that nonsense. But it ends up being, social media becomes a way that you know how people think about things. Rebecca, you know, we've talked about this. You know more about how people think about things. Like, did I really need to know that my brother-in-law thinks that? Did I really need to know that my next door neighbor, you know, thinks that? Yeah, let me make sure I get to some of these comments. That's why, Aaron, that's why I don't post much about my child on social media. I've seen so much bullying on TikTok on how someone parents their child. So let's talk about that for a second. Why is it that parents comment so much on parents on social media?
I think people in general comment too much on stuff they know nothing about. But I think with the parenting thing, what it dissolves into is they set up these pages and they're supposed to be parenting support groups. But instead of having a discussion about what you should be feeding your child at one time, it's like, you're doing that. Oh my God, you're a horrible parent. You know, you're just failing as a parent. So it devolves into that very quickly. I've never seen a successful quote support page that really was a discussion of, well, I tried this and it didn't work, or that, which that's support. But just saying you're a horrible parent, you're going to kill your child, or whatever, you know, people say the god awful things. So,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
The comments. Yeah. Scary.
Aaron, you going to say something?
And I've seen so many like bullying about parents, like, so TikToks mostly are like 60-second videos. So you're going to judge a parent on what you've seen from a 60-second video on what a child does in the background or what they're posting about their child on TikTok. Like, it's 60 seconds.
And do you think that part of it is that people want to feel superior about their own parenting?
I believe so.
So it's a way.
My way is the right way kind of thing.
So what do you think your children observe about your relationship with social media? I mean, are all of you saying that?
I'll get you started. So, my situation is a little bit different because my kids are not little anymore. I do have grandkids, one of which goes to Metro. I would say that whenever I take a picture of my 15-year-old, she is like, she lets me know whether or not it's okay or not okay to put it on social media. So I think she assumes every time I take a picture of her, it means it's going on social media, because that's what she does. She takes 500 pictures a day and she puts them on social media all the time. I think though, in terms of my interaction, what I've taught her primarily because I don't do a whole lot of political engagement. I primarily am sharing information about, events and things that are happening at UICS, or I might, some best practices, parenting tips, or if I feel really passionate and want to advocate on an issue. But I do love to, share moments. And because I share that my primary means of using social media is to engage with my friends and family, like there's some of my friends and family that get to see my kids and grandkids grow up
Right.
via social media because they don't see us as much because they're all over the place. So I
Mhm.
think I have maybe adversely taught my daughter to take a whole bunch of pictures and put them on social media, though, because that's the primary way I use social media, and she knows that.
And you know what? I don't think that that's a bad thing with limits, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but especially now that I live in a city that's not my home, I I love knowing what my friends and family are up to in the smallest ways. Like even just seeing a picture yesterday on Facebook, a friend of mine who doesn't post very much, um, him posting a picture of himself getting out and about, grabbing a beer with other friends. That made me so happy. Made me happy to see that he was out, that he was vaccinated, he's married with 2 kids, that he was, reopening into the world because I know he's been super careful. Like that was a small thing, right? And I think the small moments are good. It's just that we all know people move past it. And so one of the reasons I asked about your relationship with social media and what your kids observe is when you are seeing bad things on social media. Have you ever had your kid ask you, what are you upset about, mom? What's bothering you, dad? Because they see you reacting to the screen. Anybody? Right? So that's why when people, say, well, my kids don't have really any interaction with social media, is that really true if they're seeing you have a reaction and an interaction with social media? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, what are some of, because this also relates to your family. Have you any of you had any personal relationships that have been changed by social media?
I don't know if I'm frozen. This is Melissa.
Oh, hey,
Am I
Melissa.
You're good.
Okay.
Okay, you guys are all frozen, so not sure what's going on. I just think with the social justice and racial divide in our country right now, social media has 100% put a division within my family. So people post their interpersonal thoughts about things, and when you end up seeing them in person, it's hard to forget or think it's okay to just kind of continue a relationship without addressing the elephant in the room, especially when they're pretty polar opposite. So there's some strife, I think, I mean, my family, but I know in other families right now as well.
Exactly. And Mariah, I saw that you were saying how your husband has had to, unfollow some people because of their comments. Yeah.
Melissa, it's so bad in my family at times. My mom has tried to get me to take on some conversations, and I'm like, excuse me, I'm not even seeing what they're saying. Why don't you take the conversation on yourself? So I get it. It's hard. And then when you hear and see those things and you think different about people and you want to still love them and you're kind of expected to still love them, it might very much be from a distance, though. That's for sure.
Well, one of the things to think about, and Theodis, were you going to say something?
No, I think you all are hitting it right on the head. I had a situation with a family member where we, he distanced himself from us, but he still connected to like our family page and all of that. And I didn't know this, but you can still see if they look at your post or if they look at things that, you know, you all may have said within you all's group. And he does still look at it. So it's really interesting that he disses from us, but he still looks at everything that goes on within, which is all good. You know, we still love him and we'll be there for him. But again, you just kind of look at him from a side eye and, you know, from a distance, love him from a distance. And, you know, it's just interesting how they post things on social media, and then they act one way in front of Facebook or whatever. And then in real life, they're this totally different person. So like you said, people really show themselves on Facebook of who they really are. That's who they really want to be, but in person, they may not actually be that individual, which is, I thought it was pretty interesting. So.
And you know, on that note, I feel like there's two different philosophies about knowing how people think, right? There's a philosophy of, I just rather not know. Like, I don't need to know how big a racist, you know, my wife's uncle is. You know, I don't really need to know that the coworker who I've always had this really great relationship with at the coffee pot, you know, is a bigot about gay people or Jewish people or fill in the blank. But then there's the other philosophy, which I personally tilt toward more that philosophy of, I don't like knowing that there are people who I've always had fond impressions of who are a disappointment. They're bigots, misogynists, fill in the blank. But I need to know. You know, I need to know. Also, and this is where, sorry, my neighbors all of a sudden are dropping something. Here's where all of this gets back to race and equity. You know, oh Lord, sorry, they're working on the windows. They're cleaning windows on my second floor apartment, and all of a sudden a face just popped up. And when you live on the second floor and someone pops up in your window, that's really kind of what? So pardon me while I move.
This is long as it's not a body, Michelle. You're good.
It's like, this is one of the things about living on the second floor. You're not used to seeing faces pop up. But, you know, this is the thing about discrimination, is that if somebody were to say to you, you didn't get a job, you didn't get this job that you applied for because you're Black, and I don't like Black people, you know, the illegality of that aside, if someone told you that, then you wouldn't have to internalize anything, right? You would be, okay, this person is telling me they don't like Black people, I'm Black, I don't have to investigate. But if someone feels that way about you, oh Lord, and doesn't tell you, then you're dealing with discrimination, but you may internalize that, right? So suddenly you don't get a job that you just knew you were qualified for. And then you're going, well, maybe I'm not as qualified as I think I am. You know, maybe my education or my background isn't as superlative as I've always thought. Well, to me, that's why it's good to know who's out there who's a bigot. So then you can be like, oh, so I know not to go apply for a job where they work. Oh, I know that I don't want that person teaching my kid. You know, oh, I don't want my little girl or my little boy to be coached by this person. So, you know, that's the positive of the negativity, so to speak, right? Is that it gives you an opportunity to know where people really stand versus where they say they stand. So I have what I have broken down about social media into the 3 Bs. So the first one is, when you're looking at social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, probably don't need to do this so much with Snapchat now that I know how Snapchat works. what do you believe about what you have just seen or read? And let's explore what you believe. What are the sources of your sources? Because I think that that's one of the biggest challenges of social media is that people say, read a tweet about vaccines. And for some people, that's the end of it. Like, oh, that reinforces what I think about vaccines. Ergo, that's true. But who posted that? Was it, the CDC? Was it who? Was it a quote from Dr. Fauci? Was it an anti-vax newsletter? Is it a place that they don't do news, but they publish things as if they're news? Like, why is that something that's credible? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, when COVID first hit, I think that there was parts of social media that were helpful for us, but then there were other parts of it that were really damaging for what we were trying to do. So I think that in terms of keeping our families and our staff, many who are young and really are connected to social media, it allowed us to get real-time announcements and information out to people. But on the back end of it there was a whole lot of opinions that people had about decisions we were making, and we had a very finite list of expert sources we were using to make decisions because the regulated industry we're in, that we had to, in terms of the public health and really making sure that we were making sound decisions, not doing it based on what we thought or felt, because we'd never been in a pandemic before and we didn't have a pandemic plan in place. And so I remember the first town hall I did with our staff, and I'm trying to answer questions about us beginning to reopen. I got challenged a lot because of a lot of things that were not necessarily factual. And I'm pretty certain a lot of that was because all the things that were swirling around through social media channels. And, as I, gave them, additional information, I think it was helpful, but it was also, difficult to say, I understand you read that article or you saw this, but that's not necessarily factual information. I took them back to those sources. So that's an example of where you can immediately believe something you've seen, but it may not be rooted in fact.
Exactly. And that's why the question to ask yourself, especially if when you see something on social media, you have this sort of immediate and gut reaction to it, even if it's positive and you agree with it, ask yourself, what belief is it reinforcing? And how do I further investigate the truth of it? Okay. Because it's very easy, I think, to, even with things that you think are true. Think about, I'm not trying to get political here, so please be clear on this, that there are people, for example, who believe that the election was stolen in November 2020. Okay. Always, to me, you get back to, why do you believe that? Like, I don't even have to get emotional or political with you. What are the facts that lead you to believe that? Now, here's the thing about social media. It's not a really good place to debate those facts. What I'm talking about isn't convincing anybody of anything. My thing is that as a parent, I would think that the highest good you can do is being a source of trust and honesty for your family, for your kids, for your relatives, for the kids who come into your house. So that's why, if you always go, what are the sources for your sources? I just think it's a good mental habit to be in when you're looking at any information. I work for Louisville's NPR station. NPR can be snooty. We all know how snooty NPR can be. Trust me, if I hear something on NPR that don't quite sound right to me, Thank you. If I, I'm gonna check it, because even your source of information is only as good as the source that they rely on. Public media, for example, like many organizations, many industries, I should say, they're going through a reckoning right now where you don't have enough people of color working in public media. And so you have a reckoning where it's like you have a lot of white liberals in public media going, well, what do you mean that the way we do things needs questioning? But we're about the higher good. It's like, yeah, but if you're doing 3 stories about how African Americans are responding to wanting to get vaccines, but you don't have an African American anywhere on this story. Now, is there a reporter, an editor, a fact checker, even a coworker? Are you as advanced as you think you are? So then the next B is boost. Oops. I know these tricky things is boost. When you see things on social media, are you one of those people who's a mindless sharer? How many of you retweet quickly? Anybody a retweeter? Or someone who shares on Facebook? You may go, what's the big deal? But every time you share or retweet something, you're endorsing it. Full stop. You can say all you want to about these does not reflect my, and one of my things, and anybody who's been a social media friend or follower of mine knows this, is I contextualize 85 to 90% of anything you see on my page. So I'm not someone that just usually throws up an article about something. I go, why, I actually express why I'm putting up the article. This article is fascinating to me because I keep hearing people talk about it, and my opinion is X, but here's the article. Not a lot of people do that. And I have gotten into the habit where people will be like, well, can I reshare what you said? No, you can't, because it's what I said. If you think what I said was so important, I don't know your friends. Why don't you put it in your own words and say it to your friends? The number of people who don't want to do that. Now, why do you think, question, why do you think there are people who don't want to do that? Why is it easier to take someone else's words and just reshare?
Because you don't have to have ownership of it. So it's just like sitting behind a keyboard. You could throw whatever you want out there and you're not really owning it.
Anybody else? Accountability? Absolutely. People don't want to have, if you say it yourself, you got to be accountable for what you said and how you said it. Whereas if you merely repeat what I said, it's like, well, she said that. You're offended? Be offended at her. She said it. Anybody else? Yeah. Social media is a detached form of communication. Thanks, Deidre. So it's just easy to put stuff out there. That's the whole thing. I mean, sitting in your living room, if you put something up on social media that offends people, you can close your computer and never even go back to that post. In a way that if you were out in public and said the same thing to somebody at a dinner party or at a restaurant where somebody overheard you, you might have to actually be responsive to that person, right? So
it's kind of like it kind of creates a crowd too. Like you can get your amen choir a lot easier on social media than you could sharing a really highly charged opinion on something one-on-one in a dialogue. Like you kind of have to hold your own in the one-on-one dialogue, but you don't have to on social media because everybody else can jump in and comment and you can be done.
Exactly, which I think reminds me of what Mariah was saying about the parenting pages, right? Where people get on, someone either has this really innocent question or makes this really simple point. You know, they're in the engagement of the purpose of the page, and then all of these other people then they may not think they're attacking, but they are attacking because they're picking on what someone else has said and using it as their springboard. You know, it reminds me of when people, before I came back to full-time working, as a playwright, people would ask me, how are you so prolific as a playwright? Because I used to spit out plays a lot faster than I do now. And I said, easy. I just spit it out. I call up the computer, I start typing, I create a story. And because here's the thing, the best ideas in the world, if they don't make it to the page, I can't fix it. I can't rewrite it. I can't be, and the same thing with editors. I mean, I work in an industry where everything is being edited. Like there's nothing I do in my job goes from my computer to the greater public. There are people who see it. Well, you know, the running joke with editors are, if you ever not edited something, like if any reporter or producer sends you words, have you ever not tweaked it? No, because editors tweak and rewrite and edit. And guess what? On social media, everybody's an editor. Oh, you said you fed your, okay, I'm about to use an analogy when I know nothing about little kids. You fed your kid apple juice at 2. You're not supposed to feed kids apple juice. All of a sudden, people got commentary about apple juice, right? Whereas if you had never said it, people wouldn't suddenly burst into commentary about kids drinking apple juice. I mean, are there somebody who's a kid, don't leave me hanging here, y'all. Give me an example of what I'm talking about.
Rephrase your question, Michelle. And maybe take us off the screen, Mariah, and then we can kind of engage a little bit.
Yeah, like I'm sure there is a common, what is it that's something that parents are always sort of talking about with their kids? I mean, what's a common thing to talk about that parents talk about? Is what you feed your kids something that people post a lot about? I don't know.
Screen time? Screen time?
Screen time. So that's something that parents sort of talk about, right? So what's a controversial opinion about parenting and screen time? I would imagine that if you said, yeah, my kid was on, TikTok for 3 hours last night, I would imagine people would have comments about that, wouldn't they?
Go ahead, Raina.
Yeah, the dances. I was just gonna say that people, a controversial topic is discipline for sure. Whether or not you spank your kids or not, or even that public embarrassment that some parents put out there on their children, like they did something and so they publicly tell everybody about it, and how they made the child wear a sign on the side of the road, about what they did. That's shaming.
Wow. People do that for real?
You didn't see that a while back, a bunch of teenagers along the road. I did such and such, and now I'm such and such. Yeah.
Wow. That's something. That really is something. Like I can only imagine, because that's the other thing about social media that especially when you are talking about kids, your kids have no consent, right? Like if you post, like your example, is it Rihanna? Raina. Using your example, if you post your 12-year-old kid holding a sign on Facebook saying, I was bad, you know what I'm saying? I was real bad. Oh my God. Bye, Bailey. You know, your 15-year-old is going to be 17 in 2 years. You know, 20 in 5. Your kid is going to be like, you know what, Mom, that wasn't cool.
Right.
You know, in a way, especially when them suckers pop up as a memory, then you're dealing with that. I mean, in a way that if you embarrass yourself as a grown adult, you know, then you live with the consequences of that. So, I mean, that's the other thing about social media and parenting is that you're making choices every day. So the other thing, and you don't even have to put this up because I can just talk about it. You know, we have a few minutes left.
Before you segue to that one though, Michelle, I think another big controversial topic was I fielded quite a few questions from parents about like, what do you talk with kids about as it relates to rioting and protests and social justice? And I think there were many different camps of thought on that. I took my grandkids to one of the protests, and it's something my family cared a lot about. Other families might have said that wasn't a safe thing to do. Why would you have a child there? They're too young to do that. I think there's a lot of, you know, shaming that can unintentionally happen because parents do make the choice that they want to make. But I want to go back to what Mariah brought up about screen time. I actually think that is hugely controversial because if parents themselves don't have limits around screen time, they may not even think there is a need to have a screen time limit for kids. And the American Pediatric Society has a ton of research around what is not good for kids under the age of 5 as it relates to screen time, because of the rapid pace of brain development and what all those screens do that are counterproductive to the healthy growth and development of the brain. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's true because again, your kids are at the mercy of the things you buy and the things you do. And yes and no too, though. As I said on Sunday, I worked in a grade school where parents will have limits on what their kids can see on social media, and then their kids come to school, and all these other kids have cell phones because cell phones is the game changer. And so suddenly something that a kid couldn't see on Sunday night in their own home, they immediately know about it Monday when they go to school. So that's the other reason why, to me as a parent, you want to not just know the immediate about your family, you kind of want to keep your finger on the pulse. I'm not saying go deep into it, but you might want to know what's going on outside of the world and whether you need to sit down and talk to your kid about it. I mean, at this point, every time there's an award show, y'all as parents should just be prepared to check on Twitter to see what everybody is talking about, and then be prepared to have a talk with your kid if they're old enough. Because anymore on every award show, there is something that happens that you then see a whole bunch of people talking about the next day. And it's probably going to be like, for example, I guess Lil Nas the other day was on, was it the BET Awards? And he kissed, you know, Lil Nas, for those of you who don't know, is a Black hip hop artist who's also gay. And I guess in his routine, he kissed another man. He's openly gay. This is no state secret. You know, he kissed a man on stage, and then I didn't watch it. I mean, You know, I don't watch award shows the way I used to, because the older I get, the less I know, the fewer people I know on the shows. But the next day, all these people were having this commentary about Lil Nas kissing a man on stage. Well, as a parent, you know, maybe if you have 2 or 3 year olds, you know, it's no biggie. But if you've got 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 older kids, you might want to know that that's what people are talking about, because your kids are getting some of that. Excuse me. Excuse me. Allergies. Ohio Valley allergies. Which gets to my third B, breed, which is, are you someone who's the source of misinformation? So my first B, believe. Believe is the passive aspect of social media. Just you scrolling. I think, what's the word, Rebecca? Doom scrolling, where you just mindlessly scroll through things and you're just taking in what you see. That's believe. That's why I said, you know, check the sources of your sources. The second one is a little less passive. It's boost. What are you boosting? What are you resharing? What are you retweeting? Like, what viewpoints and people are you giving endorsement to? But the third one is about you. It's about breeding. What are you putting out in the world? What opinions based on things that are not accurate, are factual, are fair, are equitable, what are you putting out in the world? Does anybody know, anybody ever seen like a post or a tweet where you're going, where do they get that from? But they're writing it like it's a real deal. Like, I mean, I've seen people talk about vaccines and how it changes your DNA. Has anybody seen that? Has anybody seen this information where folks are talking about the vaccines that way? And it's real people talking about these things. And so if you're somebody who reads that and you go, yeah, yeah, and then you start writing posts and tweets where you say those things, you're out there breeding things that you probably have not fact checked. And you know, we only have a few minutes left, and rather than go to the very end, are there any comments, questions, thoughts that any of this, is anybody going to do anything with social media differently today because of this? Anybody want to share something that they might think about or do a little bit differently? You are a quiet group of parents.
Very.
It's just a good reminder that when our
Fact check,
children
yes, thank you.
are around, that they are our focus and not our phones, so that they know that they are more important than this.
Mhm. So you guys might be helping me come up with the 3 other letters. So we got focus and we got fact check. What would be a third F I could come up with for talking about social medias and the way to better use it in terms of, oh, I thought of another one, family, in terms of our family. Fairness, exactly. Are you looking at things that are fair? Are you passing on things that are fair? I mean, that's part of the equity of all of this. That's part of what, this organization does. I mean, you all, Deidre and team is coming up with resources so that you're raising kids in a fair and equitable society. Isn't that the goal?
Absolutely.
You know?
I
And
think fun should be one. I think we need to go back to, like, when I first got on Facebook, I've gotten off it. It was like Deidre said, running into old friends and reconnecting and all your memories here and all that. And then it rapidly went downhill. So, but
but you're right. You are so right. I mean, some of the biggest laughs I have had have been from watching something posted on social media, right? Like even there was some song, was it the Whip and Nay Nay? And just seeing all the celebrities and folks who are putting up their version of it on. I mean, that was fun. It didn't hurt anybody. It wasn't political. It wasn't even social justice. It was just, yeah, let's all unite in the fun of doing something, you know. Um, so I like that. Fact finding, focus, fair, and fun.
So I'm not going to pick up my mom's fights for her, but if I feel some type of way about somebody in my personal sphere who posts something, I'm going to ask a question of curiosity as opposed to continuing to feel some type of way about them. I'm going to be more intentional in trying to engage in some level of dialogue, not a fight, but like there are probably times where I'm avoiding people. And honestly, having grown up in a really small town in Iowa, there's a lot of people like I hid from my feed. It wasn't to the point where I was going to unfriend them because they didn't do anything to me. I just saw things I didn't necessarily want to see. And I was like, you know, I think I've garnered enough respect and love from some of these people that I could probably have a dialogue with them. Like, who am I to just never take on something just because I'm fearing the outcome of the conversation? It might not be as bad as I think it's going to be.
Well, the F I take away from that, Deidre, which is something we could all afford to do, is follow up. Rather than fight with somebody, follow up with the question, and make it a real question, not a snide opinion disguised as a question with the question mark at the end. You know, I have found that asking someone a question is one of the ways you help someone else unpack why they believe what they do, not to change their mind. And then the other thing I said on Sunday, which is a big takeaway I want you to have about social media, rather than fear, that's an F word that we don't want to have, rather than fear engaging with people on social media, look at it as an opportunity for other people to help sort out their feelings or thoughts on something. Because what I found is, I mean, I've gotten into fights with people on social media about things that I feel passionately about, usually social justice issues, racism, bigotry. I have gotten into some real, but what I tell people is it's not so much the person I'm arguing with that I'm trying to convince, it's all the silent people reading it. It's all the people following along who that discussion, even that fight, is making them go, God, I hadn't thought about that point. Oh man, this is really hitting hard with some people. Because it's usually if I feel passionate about something in a public sphere, other people are with me on it. You know, that's the empowering part of social media. Social media can be very empowering. You can find like-minded people. You can find resources. You can find a sense of community. Even with tragedy, there's something comforting in knowing that you're not in it alone. And so social media, especially if you're someone who lives alone, someone who's distant from other people, I mean, to me, that's the positive of social media, is that even entire movements, like the whole George Floyd, Breonna Taylor protest, they wouldn't have happened in isolation. People needed to know that other people were as upset as they were. People wanted affinity. People wanted comfort. People wanted even to share their pain and their anger in a constructive way, because protest and riots are two different words. So, and then if we're talking pandemic, maybe I think a lot of us during the pandemic needed to know how other people were sharing our fears. How were we dealing with things? How were we dealing with not being able to go to an event that mattered to them, right? I mean, Emily has a list of resources for this conversation that are really good. I'm just a big believer in social media is the most egalitarian tool we have had in the history of civilization. Never has it been quicker for me to find someone who can both support my passion and maybe even, you know, make it into something offline. Sure, the negative of social media is that people who don't have high-minded ideas find each other also. But we each have the power to how we're going to use this tool, and we each have the power how we're going to teach our kids how to use it. So on that note, I just wanted to thank you all for showing up, for being here, for being even those of you who were really silent. I'm going to assume that you thought about some of the things we were talking about. And I really appreciate you all. We're taking a break in July, but for those of you who will be along on the ride, I'll see you in August, hopefully, you know.
We will be regrouping a little bit and deciding for sure based on what we're hearing from staff and from teachers, and making sure that we're parents, if you have topics that are of interest to you that you'd like for us to cover in these sessions, let us know. We do appreciate your time today. I think we got all the families have chimed in, or you've been here enough. We know who you are, so we can be sure and honor your time with a gift card. These conversations are not private, so as you see them, feel free to share them within your network so we can be as big and broad as possible. And also, just a friendly reminder, we'll be closed on Monday in observance of 4th of July. So just the same way we observed Juneteenth. And I just want you to know for the record, I think she's left the call now, but Melissa Funaro over at Metro, our assistant director, said, hey, have you considered that? We were ahead of the curve. It's now a federal holiday, and we had added it to our calendar at the beginning of the school year, thanks to Melissa's suggestion. So I took a little heat at the beginning because I took President's Day off the calendar when we did that, because I don't think preschools need to be closed for President's Day necessarily. So I felt like in honor of our mission and who we are in trying to be an anti-racist organization, honoring and recognizing Juneteenth was equally as important. So you can't celebrate everything all the time. But at any rate, thanks for being here today. Have a great long weekend, and take care. Thanks, Michelle, for another great conversation, and we'll be synthesizing all of our resources in one central location, including the recordings from these sessions. Take care.
All right, everybody, thank you.